Hi everyone, and welcome to Creative Chelsea. Today I'm excited to be sharing with you a fun watercolor pencil technique using the stamps from the Artfully layered stamp set from Stampin' Up. I created this technique for the Stampin' Up social media pages. They have a Facebook page and an Instagram, and so you might have seen that over there. So today I just wanted to share with you some more details on how I created the card and walk you through the steps for this technique. If you are new to my channel and want to see more of my videos, click on the subscribe button and then the bell for notifications. I would love to be your Stampin' Up demonstrator and help you with any of your paper crafting needs. To purchase any of the products you see me use today, please visit my online store, and the link is in the description below. So this technique is going to create a watercolored image, and you're going to be able to get some different colors in it. So you can see I've got a light green and a dark green. And there are some tools that I would recommend you having for this technique, and one of them is the Stamparatus. So I've already placed my image on the clear plate, and then you can just lock it in right here. I love that about the Stamparatus, that it's removable. So I've got my cardstock, and you want to make sure that you place that underneath your stamped image when it's closed, and then you can use the magnets to keep that in place. Okay, so I'm going to move these things off to the side so that I can show you this fun technique. So you're going to also need some watercolored pencils and a spritzer. So the first thing you want to do is take your spritzer and you're going to spritz just lightly onto your stamp. Maybe 2 spritzes or so, just so you can start to see it get damp. Then you're going to begin with your lighter color, and you're just going to color with your watercolor pencil right over that stamp. Okay, so I'm going to lift this up so you can see it. You're going to see that color onto your stamp, and then you're going to add the darker color. So this time I'm going to use garden green. So the first color I used was Granny Apple Green, and now garden green, and I'm just going to add this to the bottom of the leaves just for a little bit of shadow and color change there. Okay, so you can see that color. I've got both colors there. The next step is to actually spritz this again. So just a couple spritz, not heavy. You don't want a lot of water on there. So you're going to lock that back in. And then you'll just go ahead and close this onto your paper and give it a light pressure. You don't want too much water, or you're going to lose the definition of your image. Looks like I needed a little more pressure on that right side. And if you have an area that's not getting a lot of color, you can add just a little more water there. Oops. And maybe that will help. Okay. But the fun part is that you do get a lot of different looks each time you do this. And that's one of the reasons I do suggest using the Stamparatus, is so that you can go in there and make adjustments with water or more pencil if you need to. And so that just turned out so pretty. I love all those colors there. So now I'm going to go ahead and clean this. I find that it's just easy to run it underneath some running water, and then I'll come back and we'll do our second image. So for the second piece, we're going to stamp on this piece of cardstock that's 3 inches by 5.5 inches. It's going to be kind of our background piece to the focal point, which is the one we just stamped, and we'll be cutting that one out with the coordinating dies. So for the second one, we're going to repeat those exact same steps. Go ahead and place your clear block into your Stamparatus, and then place your paper where you want it to stamp the image on that paper. So I want this one to be closer to the top, and just at a different angle. So maybe something like that. I don't want it coming off, so I'm going to slide it over just a little bit. That looks good. Go ahead and add your magnets. Okay. So then I'm going to remove this so that I can work on the plate. Take your spritzer, spray just a couple sprays of water onto there. And then I'm going to use two different colors this time. I'm going to bring in Coastal Cabana, which is more of a blue color. But I am going to start with the garden green. So that's the dark color I used for my first one. I'm going to begin with that color. I just love how these pencils just lay down a really pretty color onto this image. Just that little bit of water really makes them nice and smooth. Now, if you maybe think you have a little bit more water this time, then you don't necessarily need to respray it. So now I've got my Coastal Cabana. I'm going to add just a little color again near the bottom and along the stem of these leaves. Another fun thing that I love about this technique is that you're going to get a different look each time you do it. So just remember not to put too much water on it. Going to lock it in and then just maybe give it one spritz near the bottom. I noticed that was kind of drying out just a little bit. And then go ahead and stamp that. Light pressure just to make sure we've got contact with the paper. And there we go. I think that one turned out pretty good. A couple spots need just a little bit more. Okay, so that one's going to go off to the side to dry. And we can bring in the other one that we did, and we can go ahead and cut that out with the coordinating dies. So the dies that coordinate with this stamp set are the tropical layer dies. I did use these on another project, so if you want to see that video, you can click up in the top right corner. Just a little washi tape to hold it in place. And then you just want to make sure that you line it up with the inside edge of the die. So the stamp lines up with the inside edge. And then you can run that through your machine and be right back. So you'll end up with something that looks like this. Now for my original card, I did do a little more fussy cutting and cut down into those leaves just a little bit more than the die does. And so that is a personal preference if you want to see more of your background image. For this card, I'm going to go ahead and just do it with the die so you can see the difference between the two. So I'm going to pull in that. That's still a little bit wet, but you can kind of see how those two images are going to look together. So while we wait for that to dry, let's go ahead and work on a couple other elements that we need for the card. So I wanted some fun texture on the back of my card base. And in the same stamp set, you get this little distressed text. And so I'm going to stamp that just kind of randomly on my card base. I've got a card base of Crumb Cake, and I'm going to stamp in Crumb Cake. So I've got that ink pad and my image on the clear block. You do want to try to keep your image nice and horizontal. So just kind of try to keep that in mind as you're stamping. You also want to create some different layers and depths. Repeat some of them below the other. We are covering up quite a bit of the center, so you don't really need to focus on that area, but do try to get the edges, the bottom, and the top. So maybe something like this. Another element I need to work on is this cute little tiny gold scallop that sits along the edges of our main piece. I got this from the basic border dies. There is this border with that same scallop and a little bit of stitching. And this die set comes with 6 different dies. You've got clouds, a curve, this chevron, and then a couple kind of like a medallion, and then a zigzag. And those are really fun, and I like to use those in different ways. And so instead of creating a border with them, like a card-based border, like they're kind of meant for, I'm going to just create a little edging along the side. And so to do that, I'm going to run both of these gold foil pieces, and I'm just focusing on the center piece here. So these are 1/2 inch by 4 inches, and I'm just going to go ahead and run those through. I don't need a lot. I just need to have that scallop edge. So anything left over here is what I'm going to adhere to the back. Okay, so I've got those 2 pieces. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut where the angle changes. So I've got those scallops are going straight, and then this last one is where they start to go angled. So I'm going to cut right there and just cut straight at like a 90-degree angle to those scallops. Okay, so these are now ready for my card. And we can go back and check to see how that piece has dried. And that's looking pretty good. So now we can move on to the splattering. All right, so our next step is to do the splattering once our background piece has dried. And so if you need to heat that up with your heat tool to make it dry a little faster, you can do that. I've got a paintbrush and my silicone craft sheet, a little bowl of water, and some liquid adhesive. Now, the gold splattering, I've used the gold leafing. And so what I need to create is something sticky for the leafing to adhere to. So I've got a little dot of glue, get some water on my paintbrush, and mix that with the glue. And this is going to create a adhesive that I can splatter onto my cardstock. So once I've got that all mixed up, I'm going to take something underneath my paintbrush and tap the paintbrush onto or over to create those splatters. And I'm just doing it kind of at an angle from the top left to the bottom right. Then you want to make sure that you do clean that brush as quickly as possible so you don't ruin it, because you want to get that glue out of those bristles. So before we move on, I realized that for the original card, I adhered this top piece before doing the splattering. And so it did get some of the gold onto that top layer. So for this one, I did the splattering just on the bottom layer. So we'll see how that looks. But I wanted to make sure that you knew that the original card had that change to it. So I'm going to be using the Gilded Leafing. This is a really fun product. So I also think I forgot to mention that I used the Tombow liquid glue, and this is really great because it's sticky when it dries. And so I think that might have been confusing when I said, let's go ahead and let this dry. So you're going to take some of the leafing out of the container and just gently rub that over your splattering, and you'll start to see that it adheres where it is sticky, where you've left those splatters. You can also use a sponge to do this. So that's what this container is. I've got just some little pieces of the gold leafing that I've gathered as I've used it. You want to be really careful with it because it can make a huge mess, but just take a sponge and it can also be used to apply that gold leafing. And then you can rub off any excess. Kind of want to go around the whole piece just to make sure you get all of that glue. Then any excess can go into the other container, and you can wipe it off with that sponge too. It's really useful to have this container and sponge. And then you can see all that beautiful gold leafing that's been adhered to your cardstock. Okay, so let's go ahead and start putting some of these elements together on the card. I'm going to begin by ripping off the bottom here. Just a small tear, maybe about a 1/2 inch or so, just to give it some interest and a different kind of look, a little bit more organic. I'm also going to add my top leaf, just a little bit of liquid glue along those edges. And I'm placing this a little lower and at a different angle so that you don't cover up too much of that background one. Now again, if you wanted to add some gold leafing, you can do that to the top layer. Then I'm going to take some linen thread and I'm going to wrap it around. I'm going to start here on the back and add some adhesive just to the center. And then wrap that around the bottom. I'm going to do about 3 times. And then you can kind of spread that out a little bit if you want to get some unique angles. Next, I'm going to add our gold scallops. And to do that, I'm just going to place some tear and tape along the edge, about in the center of that length. And it doesn't really matter how much you add. Okay, so I've removed the backing from that tear and tape, and I'm just going to use my grid paper, and about 1 inch from the top is where I'm going to start adding this. And I want just a little bit of that stitching to show. So I'm kind of looking for that stitching to just go a little bit outside the edge. Okay, and if I need to kind of pull that out a little bit, I can too. Okay. So it's going to look like that. And then I'm going to repeat on the other side. So again, line it up, and then about 1 inch from the top, just place it so that that stitching just sits right along the edge of your cardstock. Okay. Just a really pretty little detail that you can add to your cards. Okay, so now we're ready to put this piece on our card base. Again, we want to line this up. This is 3 inches, this is 4 1/4, and so we're looking for about 5/8 on each side. So that goes right up against the top of the card base, and I've added just some tear and tape adhesive behind that just to hold it in place. Then I have already stamped and fussy cut out my greetings. And this is a greeting from the Artfully Layered stamp set. It says, "Sending all the hugs." And I stamped it in Memento black ink. I'm going to add this with dimensionals, which I've already added to the back. And I'm placing that below the linen thread. And then this one can go above it. Make sure it goes on nice and straight. All right, and that card is all done. I hope you enjoyed learning this fun technique using the watercolor pencils on stamps. If you're interested in getting written instructions or seeing close-up images of this card, you can visit my blog, creativechelsea.com. Thanks so much for watching. Have a creative day. Bye.